Welcome to this week's episode of Beauty Out of Mire, which is the story of Raziela Miracle and the way she's defied the odds of cerebral palsy and autism spectrum disorder. I am your narrator, Fidel Adabaraza, and I'm Raziela Miracle's mother and her mouthpiece as she is currently pre-verbal. Thank you for subscribing on our YouTube channel and for tuning in to our weekly episodes. Kindly turn on your notification bell so that you don't miss out on any new episodes. After last week's episode about Raziela's twin sister Liya Blessing, who sadly passed on due to negligence under the hands of the medics she was receiving care from, I have received messages from a number of you asking how I have managed to keep afloat in the midst of the pain and desert moments in my life, so that I'm able to narrate my story to the world with such easiness and hopefully encourage another person who could be going through a difficult time in their lives. Allow me to say that it has not been easy at all for me as an individual. It has been emotionally, physically, socially, and even spiritually draining for me. Emotionally draining because you'll remember that right after burying Liya, I had to come back to a sick child, and that is Raziela Miracle in the incubator, in the ICU. And so there was no rest for me as a person. There was no self-reflection for the moment I was on. I just transitioned from the gravesite and back to the ICU to nurse the second twin. And so it was a roller coaster for me. Emotionally, I was just going through the motions of the moment. I was flowing with life as it came. I didn't know what to do and how to go about it. I didn't process anything at that particular time. I was under grief, but yet needed to be strong for my daughter, just to see her also fight for her life in the ICU, keeping hope against hope that she would be alive and stay alive. But not just that. During that time, I will also get people, give me comments that will tear my heart apart. While at the incubator, Raziela needed to have several blood transfusions. Actually, she was getting a blood transfusion on a weekly basis, and got to a place that the lab attendant got so used to seeing me until he got baffled, I think, and he thought it was weird that we needed blood on a weekly basis. And one of the days he asked me, "Mom, have you tried to check around yourself what you ever did wrong that will be causing your children misery? Because this is not normal that a child would need to be transfused and given blood every week. There is blood being added to their body. Go and search yourself, and if there is anything that you did wrong, bring a repentance to God that He'll be merciful to your children and save them." Now that tore my heart apart, remembering that I had just buried Liya under, circumstances that I thought would have been controlled. And here was Raziela fighting for her life at the ICU. Now, while that was still going on, there was this other sister at church who knew me, who knew that my daughter was at the hospital battling for her life and I had buried the other one, because when my child passed on, it was announced at church. We had even done a fundraiser at church to help with the bills, to get her body to go and lay her body, to rest at the cemetery. And so she was aware about that. But every time this sister saw me, she would ask me, "So how are your children doing?" And it will send me right to Liya, to think about Liya, and my heart would bleed, and I'll just say, "They're fine," and I'll walk away. The next time she sees me, she will ask me the same question, "How are your children doing?" I'll say, "They're fine." I'll walk away, until one day I gathered enough courage and said, "Don't you know that one of them died?" And she looked at me with a smile and said, "Yeah, I know. And she walked away. And I asked myself, what was all that? Why did she have to always torment me by asking me how my children were doing, reminding me that I ought to have 2 children, and yet at the moment I have one at the gravesite and the other one in the ICU at the hospital. So emotionally, it was a journey for me. Physically, it has been a journey that is draining. How much energy can one person have to be a support system to a child with disabilities? You need frequent visits to hospital. You need to always look for one medical specialist after another. You need to do therapies. We have needed occupational therapies, physiotherapies, hydrotherapy, speech therapies, stem cell therapies, name them. It is exhausting and draining. We have gone to places, and because of autism, my child cannot sit still at one place, and people would wonder, is she so jumpy? Is she like this? Is she like that? She will be screaming, and people will be wondering why. She would want to steam as a child with autism, and people will be wondering why she's screaming and steaming. There are times she will have meltdowns, and people are wondering why she's having a meltdown and rolling down on the grass and doing one thing or another. We go to places and she cannot stand the high, loud noise because of sensory issues. At times, you give her food and she's not able to chew and swallow because of the cerebral palsy. And it's all so draining, both for her and even for me. Financially, you are left in a hole. You find yourself channeling every single resource in search of health and well-being of your child. You can easily find yourself selling everything around you, including your very clothes, just to ensure your child has medical access. Now, socially, it can be a very lonely journey as well, because your world and life literally revolves around your child. And these are not children that people easily think about inviting for any social gatherings. They are rarely thought of when it comes to parties. Like, nobody ever thinks about they can invite them even for a birthday party or anything, social events, camps or anything. And at times people look at them and think like they are a bother to them. So nobody thinks about their social life and the fact that they are complete human beings like any other person. And therefore, you lead a lonely life on the fringe of the society as you give support to your child, unless you individually find a way of maneuvering that as a person. Spiritually, there are days you will find yourself up on the mountain praising God, but there are times as a human being you hit your low moments. In 2016, I hit a low moment, and I think that was my lowest. I cried and prayed for death for both me and my baby for 3 consecutive days and nights. Our bedroom had turned into a mourning room. I will squat and cry and look at my child, and she will also look at me and she will cry. And so both of us will hug and will cry. I lifted up my eyes, literally looked out through the window. So all that I saw was hopelessness, was gloominess. All that I saw was uncertainty and darkness all around me. I asked God, who told you that I had enough energy for this? I actually said, God, you say in your word that you never give us what is beyond what we can handle. Who told you that I was able to handle this? If you thought so, you miscalculated. Now my energies have run out. I'm completely depleted. I'm zero. I want to end my life. And yet I knew that I cannot kill my child. I cannot kill myself. I didn't want to go to hell. I didn't want to be separated from my daughter Liya, nor from my daughter Raziela. And so I was not going to do such a damn thing. I was not going to kill myself. I was not going to kill my daughter Raziela Miracle. And so I decided to negotiate with God himself, who is the author of life and who has power to take away a person's life to take away my life and to take away Raziela's life. And I said, God, you are the one who created us. You have power to take us. So take us away. Let us not continue being on this earth. I prayed that prayer day and night for 3 consecutive days. That every morning I would wake up, and lo and behold, Raziela would be there looking at me, and I'll be there looking at her, and we were not dead. And I'll ask myself what God wanted from us, why he wasn't answering any of my prayers, not healing Raziela, not healing my pain, not taking away our lives. Until I realized I needed some sort of help, and I reached out to one senior pastor of a mega church here in the city of Nairobi, and told him I wanted to see him together with his wife. And thank God he actually availed himself and his wife, because I was an emotional wreck. I was a mess, and I knew I'll be a mess even when I went before him. And that's why I asked for his wife to be around. And they came, and I thank God I began to see life differently after they counseled with me and helped me to see life from a different perspective. But yet again, I know that virtually everyone goes through hard times. And when bitter calamities come, they certainly seem absurd and undeserved and meaningless. And most of our grief and pain does not come as a clear punishment for sins, so that just somebody will think that we are sinners, that's why we are going through this. But rather, it comes out of nowhere and baffles our senses of justice. That is why the book of Job is very relevant. Job's suffering seems to come out of nowhere and have no connection to his character whatsoever. And this story is recorded for us so that we can have some help and maintain the right kind of attitude during such calamities. Job's intense suffering was financial, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Everyone was against him, including, it seemed, even God, who he had served faithfully. Yet Job was a spiritually and morally upright man. Could any suffering be more undeserved? Should not such a righteous person be blessed, not plagued by God? The fact that Job, an outstanding citizen and upright person, had so much and then lost so much makes him a supreme example of affliction that defies human explanation. Job knew what it means to lose loved ones. He knew what it means to lose house, ability to work, health, friends, and everything in a moment. Rated as the greatest man among all the people of the East, Job was seriously wealthy. And he was the father of 7 sons and 3 daughters. He was also blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. Actually, looking at Job's biography, he was a spiritually mature man. Father of many children, owner of many herds, a man of prominence in community affairs, a man of benevolence, a wise leader, and a grower of crops. And literally speaking, Job was a good man. Yet in one terrible day, he was hit by both natural disasters and attitudes of people who will not understand him. Most of his animals were stolen by the Sabaeans and Chaldeans, and the remaining ones were reduced to ashes by a massive fireball. Many of his servants were killed, and his 10 children perished when a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the house in which they were holding a party. And on top of that, just as Job was recovering from the shock of losing his wealth and his children, he contracted a dreaded disease. Loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job's health began to deteriorate. Job was covered with boils that opened and drained with pus, then got clogged with dust and got infested with worms. His skin started to peel off, and he was hit by a combination of fever, lack of sleep, and depression. And rather than standing by Job in his difficult moment of life, his wife turned the screw and indirectly challenged Job to commit suicide. "Curse God and die," she said. His tight circle of friends did not make it any better. They began by being sympathetic, but soon changed their tune and told Job that his great suffering must be punishment for great sin. That was an ouch. From then on, Job rode on an emotional roller coaster, overwhelmed by his situation. In the depths of depression, Job wished he had been stillborn. Why did I not perish at birth? There were times his faith got lifted up and he would look forward in faith to spending eternity in God's presence. And he would say, I know that my Redeemer lives. I myself will see him with my own eyes. But there are times that he got drained emotionally, and at such times he would question God. At one point he questioned God's justice in allowing the ungodly to spend their years in prosperity and go down to the grave in peace, while he was reduced to dust and ashes. There were periods when Job felt that God was either distant or deaf. There are times I have asked God why people would get children and throw them in, dump them at the dump sites, throw them in the dustbins, throw them in the toilets, and God still will give them children and allow the children to live and survive and be healthy. And yet, here I am. I've been a Sunday school pastor. I've been a children's pastor. I have served him, and yet would find myself with a dead child and one with a disability struggling through her life. But friends, God never sleeps and he never slumbers. He's in complete control and he knows where you are at in life. And he knows how old you are, and he knows how much time you've spent down and doing what you are doing. And he knows what has happened to you, and he knows who has walked out and left you, and he knows who has betrayed you, and he knows who has molested you, and he knows who has raped you, and he knows who has rejected you, and he knows about your bills, and he knows about your degree, and he knows what you have that you have dropped out of school. And he knows about your child's health, and he knows about the issues, the land issue, the court case, that you have, the bank loan, and he knows about that mortgage, and he knows about that accident. He is sovereign. He's all-knowing. He knows about all that. Your trouble may have been in his will. Your pain may have been in his will. It doesn't matter what you have gone through in life. Just learn to maintain a positive attitude. David said, if I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the utmost parts of the sea, even there you are there. He was with you in the middle of your trouble. He was with you in the middle of your pain. He is with you in the middle of that pain. That's why Paul said, I have learned whatever state I'm in, therewith to be content. I know how to be rich. I know how to be poor. I know how to be free. I know how to be bound. It does not matter what you've gone through. Nothing just happens. No devil in hell has ever been able to abort the purpose of God. Not once. The reason we worship God is because he is the CEO and controls the affairs of the universe. He is in charge. He runs the universe. Think about Job. Job chapter 1 verse 6 to 12 describes a meeting between God and Satan. And in verse 7, Satan says that he spent his time going to and fro on the earth. Then God set up Job for trouble. It is God who brought Job into the picture. And even when Satan went out to strike Job, he got orders from the Lord on how far he could go with Job. Don't you think God is in control of your life? He knows what you're going through. He determines how far you can be tossed around and sifted like wheat. He loves you with an everlasting love. You are inscribed in the palm of his hand. He knows you. He's in control of that situation. Just know that there is an all-knowing and all-powerful God who created the heavens and the earth and controls the affairs of men. Jehovah El Elyon is his name. What God intends happens. What he plans stands. None can frustrate his plans. No one can turn back his hand. When we understand this, then you will come to realize in our experiences that absolutely nothing happens to a child of the living God that the Most High God is not sovereign over, and that he is above every difficult circumstances. He's high above every difficult circumstance, over every demonic force, over every sorrow, over every tragedy. Keep hope alive. Know that God is in control. Even in that situation, he's working out for your good to glorify his own name in your situation. Thank you for tuning in. Keep hope alive. We'll be right back with the story of Raziela Miracle, beauty out of Mire, defying the odds of cerebral palsy and autism spectrum disorder, next week, Friday. God bless you.